Good evening and welcome to another edition of Down to the Wire. This week is a key 3-year-old week, and joining me again is Capping with Candice. Candice here, and Candice, the King's Bishop and the Painting the Canoe race, the Travers at Saratoga, and then we go out west and Pacific Classic, 10 furlongs, and then also a sprint race that has drawn some kind of a mixture of some proven veterans at the classic sprint distance. So let's start it off this week, the King's Bishop. The key thing with this race is that normally you get a horses cutting back, and then you get some proven sprinters. And this year I think we got a solid King's Bishop field.
I definitely agree. I'm actually really excited about this field because I think not only do we have horses cutting back and some stretching out, because of course we have kind of a tricky distance in 7 furlongs, but we also have some horses who have been running at this level, and then we have some who are kind of making a step up in class and some of the up-and-comers. So it actually was a really interesting race to me. For me, I've been high on Wildcat Red for a while now. I loved him down at Gulfstream. I thought that he was very much, very primed going into the Haskell, and not that he would have won anyway. Bayern was in a league of his own that day, but he did stumble coming out the gate, had to rush into that pace, and clearly was not having any of their attempt to rate him early on. He was not going to take that. So, there were some legitimate troubles in there. I do think the cutback for him is going to be fantastic. He's just a fast horse. My only worry for him in here would be that there's a couple sprinters in here who might be a little faster than him early on, so it's going to be a matter of how he's going to handle that. If he can settle, I don't think he can necessarily run away from this field like he has been able to do to some fields down in Gulfstream, but I think he's the class of this field. So if he's able to settle, obviously near the lead, but perhaps not on it, I think, he's the class of this field and should, run pretty well here.
I think it's a good matchup because you have the early speed in the Big Beast, and he's going up in class. Then you have the kind of the versatile speed of Wildcat Red on the cutback, and he also won the Swale coming from 3rd place. And then you have a horse that's really developed into a nice closer. It's kind of fun to watch these horses develop because when Coup de Grace ran his first 2 races, I mean, he was a total tap-it, headstrong, had to be on the lead, and then lo and behold, look at those last 2 races of Coup de Grace. He really has learned to rate, and the Philadelphia race was the first sign. But that last race, he really put on a nice stretch effort. Maybe it wasn't the fastest speed figure, but it was a nice looking win.
I mean, that race very much impressed me from him for exactly the reasons you said, that he showed he was able to settle off the pace and not be nearly as headstrong as we had saw from him in his first few races this year. I don't necessarily love him here. I just think that there's better horses here, but I definitely don't expect him to disgrace himself. And if there's anything that you can say for Coup de Grace, I think this is, his distance. I mean, maybe 6.5 he's a little bit better at, but I mean, he's definitely a tried and true sprinter. Where some of the horses cutting back, we'll see if they can really hang with these speedy ones sprinting. A couple I wanted to mention at longer prices. CZ is a horse I've been a big fan of as well, coming out of Florida too. He just seems like he's a horse who's really started to come into his own in the later part of this year. He ran against some of the big boys down at Gulfstream earlier in the year, and maybe was not quite good enough to cut it, especially routing. But since he's cut back to sprints, I thought that he's really kind of came into his own, and he did finish second to Coup de Grace in that Amsterdam at Saratoga, and he won the race before that. So at a longer price, I definitely could see CZ potentially getting a minor award here, perhaps not battling for the win, but I don't think, 2nd or 3rd is out of the question for him. And another one I want to mention, I know a lot of people are a fan of Miles Stan, especially coming off of his effort back in the Derby trial that was won by Embellishing Bob via disqualification. I had him in there. I loved him in there. Thought he ran a really big race there. He's come back since and won an allowance pretty nicely over the synthetic. I do think he is a little bit better over synthetic than he is dirt, but regardless, I just think this is going to be a little bit of a class test for him. I mean, Obviously, Bayern was in that Derby trial, but I don't think he was 100% or anywhere near 100%. And I just think that this is a little bit tougher of a test for Miles Stan, especially speed figures wise. He's going to have to improve a little bit to really make an impression here. But I do know he has a lot of fans, and so we'll just see how he does at this level.
Yeah, the couple of those horses, for CZ, what I like to note about him was, he's 9 for 10 in the money. He's ran in a lot of stakes races, so he's not really necessarily going up in class. And then, Nick Zito's having a good Saratoga meet, so I think there's some things to like about him. My Otis says, Dan, there's nothing wrong with him. The only thing is he's 3 for 9 overall, but he's 3 for 3 on synthetic. But he does have 2 wins at 7 furlongs. Yet I also, I'm a firm believer in the synthetic to dirt bounce. So I kind of go both ways with him. He likes the distance, but he's 3 for 3 on synthetic. Yet now he's facing solid proven horses, but I do think the price will be right. And then what about Fast Anna? You may not remember the mother of that horse, but Dreaming of Anna was a Grade 1 horse, and this horse is kind of just freaked so far down at Gulfstream. You talk about the acid test, but I mean that last race he won by 13, but I don't know. I haven't really looked at a Gulfstream form since the Florida Derby, so I'm not sure what their summer races are like.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that they were the toughest races by any means that he was running in, but for me at least, I'm looking at Wildcat Red perhaps as being the horse to beat here, and I think Fast Anna is the horse who could perhaps be the undoing of Wildcat Red. If Fast Anna goes out there and gets a lead, rather easily just because he's the speed of the speed, well then Wildcat Red might be in a little bit of trouble, just showing some of his history, maybe, not always being so comfortable running behind horses. Though he did do it well down at Gulfstream 2 back. I do know that Fast Anna's most recent allowance race, the second place finisher, who he beat by 13 lengths, came back to win next time out and got a pretty good speed figure in doing so. So it is an acid test, but I think that the morning line is pretty accurate, and as far as being, 5-6 to 1, I think he's definitely worthy of a shorter price here, and one that definitely shouldn't be forgotten among the big names.
Well, for me, I kind of debated back and forth. First, I was going to go with Wildcat Red because I really do like him as a gritty horse, but I was just kind of visually really kind of mesmerized by the Big Beast last race. What I really just liked his look. Like, he just had that arching long neck. He looks like a classy horse. His speed figures are solid. I think he's got some grit to him. He hasn't really had to show that. So I ended up going with the Big Beast, and then Wildcat Red for second as my top 2.
For me, I decided to go with Wildcat Red on top. I think he's, definitely running the classiest races of this group, and I always love a horse going 7 furlongs. I always love the horse on the cutback. So I'm going to go with him on top here, with Fast Anna second, and with CZ at a little bit longer price for third.
Should be another great running of the King's Bishop. And now we go to the Travers, and a lot of people call this the Midsummer's Derby. Otherwise, they like to paint the canoe right after the race. But this year, basically, if you take the top distance horses from the East Coast and you add in Bayern, this is pretty much who you would write down to be in this race, and they kind of got them all together. So first off, we'll go through each horse. We'll kind of each take turns going over a couple of horses. Then we'll actually make our selection. So kind of start off with the top 2, and then I'll take the next 2.
Okay. The one post is Commanding Curve. We've seen him several times now. Of course, he really ran well in the Kentucky Derby, closing into not the fastest pace in the world. He struggled a little bit since then. I don't think the one post does him any favors considering his running style, and he's just so tough because he's one who is, always kind of has to drop several lengths back. He doesn't seem to have that tactical speed. Distance is not a concern by any means, but I think as far as a pace perspective is concerned, he really would need kind of a meltdown for him to make something happen here, and I'm just not sure he's going to get that. The 2 posts is Bayern. He's our Haskell winner, and definitely the speed of the speed in this field unless something unforeseen happens. by all accounts, at least in my mind, he's the one to beat here.
Charge Now is the 3-horse. The interesting thing about him is, I remember you liked him back in the Iowa Derby, and remember that the track, it rained that day and then it rained that night. So I just think he never took hold of that surface. I think his last race in the Curlin is a lot more representative of where he is right now. And surprisingly, Bill Mott, after that race, who normally doesn't say much, he was pretty, for a guy that just lost a race, he was pretty excited. So I have a feeling this horse is going to run a good race. V.E. Day, he was the winner of the Curlin. The key thing about him is, the trainer, James Jerkin, he also trains Wicked Strong. But this horse has won a couple in a row now, actually 3 in a row. And I always say when a horse wins 3 in a row, that gives him a little bit of street cred. And then also, he's got distance breeding. He's by English Channel, who's known more as a turf horse, but out of a deputy minister mare. So I think he's improving, and he at least can get the distance.
In the 5-post is Viva Majorca, who also just ran back with V.E. Day in Charge Now in the Curlin. He finished 4th there. He's kind of the buzz horse. He was, had run well in sprints before stretching out there. That was his first time stretching out. A lot of people giving him Twitter buzz, thinking that he had a pretty tough trip there in the Curlin, and he did. But I'm not going to say he was the best in that race by any means. But if you're keen on him, definitely check out that replay, because he did have a little bit of trouble coming down the stretch there, and maybe you could think he would have finished a little bit closer. Distance is not a concern for him either, though Ian Wilkes hasn't had the most fantastic Saratoga meet by any means, so it's something you have to take into account. And the number 6 is Tonalist, of course, our Belmont Stakes winner, who finished 2nd in the Jim Dandy to Wicked Strong. Another one who not worried about the distance at all. Maybe he even wants further than this. I'm concerned about how one-paced he has looked in his recent races. So I think tactics and strategy is going to be, of even more importance to him than maybe some of the more versatile runners in here.
Wicked Strong, he comes in. I think the key salient point with him is the last race he added blinkers. That helped him show more speed. I also think he got the jump on Tonalist in the last race, which we'll debate and talk more about that as we talk strategy for this race. His 3 major wins, his 3 signature wins, were all in New York, so that's a positive sign. And, realistically, he did have a rough trip in the Derby, and if you throw out his Holy Bull, he pretty much, what you see is what you get on the form with him. So I think he's, he fits in this race, and he's definitely a contender. Kid Cruz, this guy, once he actually started working out, he started picking up a couple of wins. He definitely has the pedigree, but I still go back and just see this guy as a Grade 2, Grade 3 horse overall.
Okay, rounding out the field here, we have Olin Bader, who he just broke his maiden back in March, and since then he's been kind of like the close but no cigar horse. He's been running in Grade 6 company, and often hits the board, but just is maybe a little bit tough to win with. Typically, he comes from further off the pace, though. In the Jim Dandy, he ran a little bit closer and then just progressively faded. So it'll be interesting to see what kind of tactics they use with him here as well, if they try to run him close again or maybe set him back to his, one run from the back tactics. And running out the field in the 10 post is Mr. Speaker. He, of course, is our Belmont Derby winner. We have typically seen him on turf and synthetic. And, his run, I thought, though, in the Holy Bull was better than it looked. It was a little bit of a weird race. We saw a few horses underperform there. And since then, he's come back. And, as far as the turf and synthetic runners go, he's been running against the best of the best. And it is worth noting that in his Belmont Derby, that form's been franked very well already. Adelaide, of course, won the Secretariat last weekend, and Gayo Chop, who finished 4th, has since come back to just absolutely obliterate a Grade 2 field over in France. Of course, those runners are on the turf, but regardless, he's beating quality horses, and he's another who absolutely wants this distance, so that's Mr. Speaker.
Solid field. The other thing I'll add about Mr. Speaker is I like the move. Nobody remembers who won the Secretariat Stakes. Throw him into the Travers. He definitely can get the distance. I'm a firm believer, I've talked about in the past, not so much key races, but there are certain days on certain times of the year that when you look back, a horse just was not going to lose that day. So whether or not Cairo Prince ever does another thing again, back on that Holy Bull day, he was not going to lose. So you could have thrown, Mr. Speaker could have ran his eyeballs out that day, and I actually think he made a mid-race move going into the turn. He made a 3-wide move at the exact same time that Cairo Prince made his move, and then he just backed out of there. He was rushed up early. The trainer was upset after the race that he thought the jockey moved too soon, and I think deep down he does have a dirt pedigree. So, you know, I just think sometimes there's horses that people quick rush to judgment on, but shared belief or constitution on that day was not going to beat Cairo Prince. I mean, he was just geared up to run a 100 speed figure, and nobody else was going to do it. So now that we've kind of introduced the field, what are some key factors for you, and what is going into your wagering mind or selection mind?
Okay, for me, this race can go one of two ways. If this race is run to how it looks on paper, I think Bayern absolutely runs away, will then be the fastest horse on a lone lead, and that is never an angle that I'm going to bet against. So if this is run how it is on paper, I think it's Bayern's, and I would have a hard time seeing him lose. But I have a hard time really thinking, I have to think in my mind, somebody is going to be sent. I mean, I'd hope they learn their lesson from the Jim Dandy that you can't just let him go. He's do that. So it's a matter of trying to figure out who would be sent. To me, the only logical horse would be Tonalist. I don't know if they would do that, and I don't even know if he's necessarily fast enough to do that. But I would really be interested in seeing that scenario, because Tonalist has been so unpaced, you know, in his last several races, that I think you really do need to ping him out front and have him make this into a true endurance test. If he does that, he has an advantage, because perhaps he wants to go longer here than anybody else. But I'm not sure they're going to do that. So for me, this is a race that I personally am not going to be wagering on, just because I don't have a firm enough idea of what is going to happen up front, whether or not Bayern is going to get a lone lead, or whether or not somebody's going to come after him. I'd be surprised if nobody did. But if someone does, I'd really love for it to be Tonalist. I think that, you know, he's one who really could benefit from that, and sitting back with him I don't think does anything. I think he kind of loses his chance if he tries to rate, because he doesn't have a turn of foot.
For me, I really like Bayern in this spot. I just think he is the now horse. I don't see any similarities to Verrazano and Elusive Quality. Those two horses were trained by a trainer who's won for 41 in the Derby, and those two horses are trained by a trainer that has never won the Breeders' Cup Classic. So I don't see any similarities to Bayern and those two chumps. I think Bayern has the fastest race of the year in the Woody Stevens. I think he outran Wildcat Red in the Haskell, and I think Wildcat Red is going to probably prove that 2 races before this race. And yeah, if somebody wants to go after him and sacrifice their horse, he'll lose. But it ain't going to be Tonalist, and trust me, Bayern ain't going to run a 1-9-3. He's going to run a 1-11. That's going to put him up by 2 to 3 lengths, and I think it's going to be see ya from flag fall to that's all. And my other opinion is if Bayern doesn't go wire to wire and doesn't win this race, I don't think Wicked Strong or Tonalist are any better than any of these other horses. I'd rather have Viva, Majorca, Charge Now. I'd rather go Chaos. So in pick 3s and pick 4s, I'm playing Bayern, Charge Now, and Viva, Majorca, and Yulbinator, and I'm throwing out Tonalist and Wicked Strong. Those two are even, and they're not fast enough to catch Bayern.
Yes, I see it similarly in that sense. You know, to me, the 2-1 for Bayern is very justified, and for me, this is kind of a 50-50 way for the pace scenario, and I know that if he gets a lone lead, I'm very, very confident that he wins this race. So 2-1 on him, to me, is justified. I think that both Tonalist and Wicked Strong are underlays, and I think they will remain underlays. And to be honest, I think that both of them could easily go off shorter than Bayern, which is, I wouldn't use either of them either. I also use Charge Now, and I'd also use VE Day. I'm a big fan of this horse. I think that He really is up and coming. I absolutely loved his race in the Curlin. I know he only won by a nose, but the way that he circled that field, how he did, that was very impressive to me. And like you said, with that English Channel breeding, I know this isn't on the turf, but he's definitely bred to go, a distance of ground. And I think he's one of these that he would almost prefer to go a little bit further. And even though Jerkins does have Wicked Strong in here, I mean, we can't deny how well Jerkins has done this meet at Saratoga as well. So Bayern is definitely a must-use for me. And then at longer prices, I would take Charge Now and VE Day out of that Curlin and use them as well.
Well, I think it's always a fun race. I think, jockey tactics. And, I like the fact that Bayern, he's the one that stepped up here. He made 2 trips out east, and to me, he is what adds the intrigue. If Bayern wasn't in this race, this would just be the Jim Dandy Part 2. So I think win or lose, at least he adds some luster to the race, and I think he should be commended for that. And a tough loss third, there's nothing wrong with that. He'll go back, give 60 days, and try to wire him in the Breeders' Cup Classic. So I don't think he loses either way here. I think if he wins, he's the clear-cut favorite for 3-year-old of the year. I mean, he's going to have 3 straight wins, and he's going to have won the Woody and the Haskell and that one, and that's why they're here. And I think they're going balls to the wall, and I think they're going to try to get the job done. So, it's always tough to ship twice. Now, Sunday, we go to the marquee day of the meet for Del Mar. You're back out in California. It's every week with Candice. It's kind of, where in the world is Carmen Sandiego? But this week you're out in California. And first race we have is some hard-hitting sprinters, again, going at kind of a tough distance. And a few of these guys have faced each other, small field. And what are some of your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, this is a really interesting race, and of course we get Big Mocker back, who has just won the Bing Crosby, and I'm really interested in seeing how he runs here. I think that they would love for him to win this race, being that the Bing Crosby was a win and you're in for the Breeders' Cup Turf, and I highly doubt they're going to be sending him down the hill anytime soon. This, of course, is a win and you're in for the Dirt Mile, so that gives him a little bit more of an options with him as far as Breeders' Cup time comes around. And to be honest, in this race, I have a hard time going against him. I mean, I know that, this is a guy who was a former maiden claimer, and now he's up in, graded stakes company, but he's a horse who, on the West Coast, if you pay attention to the West Coast, he's been getting good for a long time now. If there is a concern with him, perhaps it's the distance. It's, like you said, it's a tricky distance of 7 furlongs. I think he's a little bit better at 6, but it'll be an interesting test for him to see if he can get it done going a little bit further against this level of competition.
Golden Sense is a horse that, I don't know, every once in a while some of these horses just get these reputations. And, the facts are he's won 1 of his last 10 races, and yet he's been favored like 7 times in his last 10 races. He ran a tough luck second last year to points off the bench, actually to FedBiz in this race, after losing a couple of times favored over points off the bench. I didn't like the way he looked late in that race. Everybody was saying, oh, another stride, he'd have beat Big Mocker, but I just didn't like his action. He's another one of these horses that's had about 50 workouts this year, and maybe if they'd have ran him once or twice rather than every 6 days he's got a 6 furlong. I don't understand. Are they paying him for these workouts, or like every workout's a 111? Like, what good does that do you?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I didn't really love how he looked in that race either, and it is interesting how some of these horses, will see them just get bet down every single time, and it's like, and for what? It doesn't seem like, they definitely aren't backing it up and winning all that often. An interesting one here, though, is FedBiz, who certainly seems to be a fan of the all-weather over at Del Mar. He shows up here after running what I thought was a really nice race last time on the San Diego Handicap, and he beat a few, horses that we might see in the Pacific Classic as well. And I do think that they lost the whip there with him. Not that he needed it by any means, but I thought he was pretty impressive last time out. And he's one that'll be cutting back here. And again, at 7 furlongs, that for me, that's always kind of seems to be the angle that I like to go with.
So yeah, for me, I did not like FedBiz going into that last race, but he impressed me. He's always had the talent, and I just can't. I mean, Golden Sense will be even money, and FedBiz is cutting back and comes off a win. I guess I'd rather have him at 9-5. So I went with FedBiz. I have no idea what Silencio is going to do, but I have a feeling he might like the cutback and he might like the poly. I mean, as goofy as it sounds, I'd rather have him than Golden Sense.
I don't know if I agree with that far, but my selection here also is going to be FedBiz. I love that race from him last time. Like I said, I tend to side with the cutback for 7 furlongs, and I don't know, these Baffert Cleamshaw horses just seem to be rolling right now, so he's going to be my pick. He loves Polly here at Del Mar, so I expect him to run another big one.
All right, the Pacific Classic. This race has been pretty anticipated for quite a while. We got a pretty large field expected, and we've got, you know, with the turf and the poly horses entering, and then you have the defending champion, Game On Dude, and then you have the 2-year-old champion, Shared Belief. Kind of give me some of your thoughts about this race.
This race is, you know, definitely one that I've been looking forward to for a long time now. You know, yes, we get the kind of the showdown, I guess, between Game On Dude and Shared Belief here. I do really think that Shared Belief is the best 3-year-old, though, you know, I have a hard time fully saying that when we haven't seen him tested at this level since he was a 2-year-old, but I'm kind of speaking on potential there, I guess. You know, for me, it's going to be tough because I think, you know, this race is completely going to be based on the pace scenario, at least as far as Game On Dude is concerned. I'm just briefly looking over the field right now. They just drew the race 20 minutes ago. I don't see a ton of speed here, aside from Game On Dude on first glance, so that's definitely a benefit for him in this circumstance, and it really is his only chance of winning. With him, it's pretty simple these days. If he's lone on the lead, I bet him to win. If he's going to be contested up front, then I stay far, far away from him and bet others. I'm not sure how much I love Shared Belief breaking from the outside in an 11-horse field, but at the very least, you know, it's going to be an acid test for him, but I do expect him to run well. Of course, he's getting back on the poly where he's had some of his best results to date. So, you know, for me, it's a little bit between the two of them. I don't really see anybody else getting into this all that much. I'd be surprised if one of Game On Dude or Shared Belief didn't get the win. But we do have an interesting field, as you said. We do have Frack Daddy in here. We do get the Toast of New York, our winner over in Dubai, over here on the synthetic.
Yeah, he got his jockey from Twitter.
Yeah, he got his jockey from Twitter. His normal jockey wasn't available for the race anymore. So, I think that was the first jockey booking on Twitter I've ever seen before. But hey, do what you got to do. But we do get, you know, the horses you would expect. The Clubhouse Ride, Majestic Harbor, Imperative, the horses who've been running on the West Coast. I just don't see a whole lot of that form reversing. To me, it's going to be Game On Dude, or it's going to be Shared Belief. A slight preference to Game On Dude for me, just because I think he's going to be a better price than Shared Belief. And then, like I said, just on first glance here, I don't see a whole lot of speed up front. Maybe Frack Daddy, but I don't think Frack Daddy is fast enough to really try to hang with Game On Dude. You know, you have to bear in mind the races that Game On Dude has lost this year. You know, he really has basically had horses go on suicide missions to beat him, as far as Blue Skies and Rainbows, Fury Camp Corey is concerned, and even that weird race at Charlestown. I don't know what was going on up front there. It was crazy. But, you know, I don't see any horse here who strikes me as one who's just going to be completely sent, you know, on a mission to bring down Game On Dude here. So I think this bodes well for a really nice race here, because I think we're probably going to see a top effort out of, you know, the two big stars.
You know, for me, horse racing is a game of opinions, and I don't know. I've just settled on my opinion that this isn't Game On Dude as a 4-year-old or 5-year-old. Game On Dude is now 7. He's lost 5 out of 6. He's finished out of the money 3 straight times. There was no excuse for Charlestown, and his last race he showed no heart. You're just hoping that he drinks from the fountain of youth, or he literally gets by with 113 fractions. And Del Mar's hated that surface. That's why last year he was actually decent odds in that race, and he got a 113 fraction. He's not doing that again. So shared belief, I like, but if you look at it on paper, again, I'm pretty, like, if you look at it on paper, like, this is the worst bet ever. He's going 10 furlongs for the first time. He's facing a full field. He's facing older horses, and he has 2 races this year, and one of them was 6 furlongs. Like, there is no way that anybody in their right mind would run to the windows and say, yeah, I'll take that 7-5 on this. So again, you're just betting him on potential, or you're betting him because he's never lost. Nothing wrong with that. I guess I'd rather just take some of these goofballs. I know, Frack Daddy for some reason. Clubhouse Ride's at least working out well. I mean, I guess my opinion is I think Game On Dude is done, and I think this is his last career race. And if they run him again if he runs out of the money here, I just think it's let the guy go out with a little bit of dignity, and rather than losing 6 out of 7 and not even getting leads over. I mean, that last race, Fury Kapori was an optional allowance claimer, and he put him away after 2 furlongs. So I just am not a fan of what he's been doing lately, and I may be totally wrong, but at least that's my opinion, and I'm saying it before the race rather than after the race. And I think he's 7 years old. I mean, 2 years ago you could say things like, oh, he had 1 bad race, but his lifetime record is 17 for 34. That means he wins 50% of the time. He's now lost 5 out of 6 and ran out of the money 3 out of the 6. Like, there is just you got to go too far back to find too many horses that he can beat. And shared belief, I love the horse. I'm going to pick him just because why not? But mathematically, it's probably the worst bet out there. He's facing older horses, full field, Del Mar surface, and going 10 furlongs. But visually, my God, he's struck me since day 1 at Golden Gate. So I'm going to go with shared belief, and maybe I know, and Clubhouse Ride is my top 3.
I don't know how to top all that. That was quite the speech. I couldn't disagree more about Game On Dude. No, yes, he's an older horse, but his big cap to me showed that he, is every bit what he once was. I don't think, if you're having horses basically sent on suicide missions to beat you, then I don't know. That's basically the only tactic to beat him, and it's worked this year. And yes, Fury kept Corey, wasn't a lounge runner, not too far back, but we forget he was a classy juvenile. He did finish second to Violence back in the cash call, and he is a horse who was getting very good over at Santa Anita before running that race. He had won several races going a mile there, and he clocked some pretty fast opening fraction there. So I wouldn't expect Game On Dude or anyone to put him away there. He just, kind of was sent to, I don't know what it was. He was very keyed up that day, and nobody was going to have a chance who was anywhere near that pace. I'm going to pick Game On Dude to win here. Like I said, on first glance, I see him as being the lone speed or close to it, or at least I don't see a real front-end threat. I will also take Clubhouse Ride, though I don't love him as much at this distance, but I do think he is one who runs very well over synthetic, and, he's a horse who just has been there all year long. He's always, either winning or second, and he's always in the mix, and, he's just an honest enough horse that I would be surprised if he's not in the mix here. So I'm going to take Game On Dude over Clubhouse Ride. I'm very, very interested in seeing Share Belief, particularly from the straw, but I agree. I don't see how you can bet on him. I mean, if you're playing multiple race wagers, I think he's a must include, but, speaking of just a win bet or, an exact, I think it's really tough to include him considering, all the new factors he's going to be facing here at what's really going to be a very, very short price.
Well, an exciting weekend coast to coast, and the Spa has a great undercard as well, and I think a lot of horses will step up that day, so I think there'll be a lot of chatter after about 7 or 8 of those races. The Ballaston Spa, and then there's a nice 2-year-old race, and of course, no matter who wins the Travers, they already start painting the canoe immediately after the race, and the King's Bishop is just one of those races that it's kind of like the Met Mile. Like, whoever wins that race always just gets respect. Somebody always just says, oh, he won the King's Bishop. So, that's just one of those key races that kind of once you win that, it's on your resume, King's Bishop winner. So that'll be a big race. And, you know, Shared Belief, I want to see him against older horses. I want to see him at 10 furlongs. If he does happen to win, it gets interesting because, yeah, he's only got 3 races and a 6 furlong race doesn't count. But, you know, again, he'd be the first one to beat older horses in a full field at 10 furlongs. And to me, that's got to give him a little bit of cred. So I think he has the most to gain, and I really think he has nothing to lose. I mean, so I like the fact that Shared Belief's kind of going for it as well. I like these bold moves. So of the 4 races, is there one horse in particular of the 4 that you feel the most confident in of your picks?
I was going to say, I feel the most confident in Game On Dude. I think I'm going to go with that, actually. I mean, I'm very confident that Wildcat Red is going to run his race. I'm just a little bit worried if Fast Anna perhaps outbreaks him, how he's going to handle that. But I've been waiting for this race for Game On Dude. I kind of thought that we might not have a Blue Skies, Rainbows, or Fury Kept Corey because we have Shared Belief in here. And, you know, any time that he's going to have a little bit of breathing room out front, I will take him, especially on what's going to probably be a decent price. And, you know, if he's not what he was, we'll see it here. But I will gladly take decent odds on him for once.
Sounds like a great weekend, and you're back in California. Are you actually going out there on Sunday?
I am, yeah. So I've been looking forward to this weekend because this is, you know, definitely shaped up to be, I think, one of the nicer preps, you know, going into the Classic.
Sounds great. That's Capping with Candice, CHair889 on Twitter and cappingwithcandice.com. Follow me at Derbyologist, and that's going to do it for another edition of Down to the Wire.